Let's now switch from the Middle East to Asia, specifically to Laos, where Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his U.S. counterpart Antony Blinken, who is now on a six-nation tour through East Asia and possibly his last such tour as U.S. Secretary of State. What will more U.S. military presence bring to the region? What does it mean to ties between China and the U.S.? Joining me in this part are Professor Rosario Malindog-Uy, Director and Vice President for External Affairs of the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute, and S.L. Kanthan, geopolitical analyst. Welcome to the show. Well, Anna, I will start with you. So, according to reports, the two diplomats, top diplomats from China, from the U.S., they met with each other and talked about an hour and 20 minutes this time around. So, how much do we know? How do you evaluate this latest meeting between the top diplomats from the two major powers?
Yes, thus far, the U.S. Diplomats and also Blinken actually and Austin visited Manila, and I think there was also a meeting in Vietnam. But for me, Laos, I think. But I think what is important for the moment is just to look at what is happening in Manila and the meeting last Monday or last Tuesday between Austin and Blinken and our counterparts in the Philippines. As you can see, there was a promise of 500 million US dollars that the United States will be assisting or will be giving to the Philippines in terms of defense and military capabilities. But one thing that you have to note that this $500 million is not yet there. It's a pledge. But the most important thing I think that we have to understand is what would be the implications of this. First and foremost, it connotes that U.S. expanding its military presence in the region through the Philippines. Second is it signals the continuation of the militarization of the Philippines by the United States. And the reason for this is they justify this as a deterrence against China over the conflict in the South China Sea between the Philippines and China, which I don't believe that it actually would deter China if China would do something. And the third one is the overall goal of this is I think from my perspective is to counter China in the region. And in terms of the overall situation, I mean, this kind of moves on the part of the United States is, I think, geared towards and caters to the containment and countering policy of the United States against China. But the most important, I think, is what would be the impact of this in the region. First impact, I think, it can provoke an arms race among regional powers and also among countries in the region. And I think it will escalate or heighten the tension that is already there between the United States and China when you talk about security and defense. And of course, it will also heighten the not so good political and diplomatic relationship between the Philippines and I think and China. And when it comes to the meeting in Laos, at the moment, I think it's a good step, and I think it's a good thing that our different diplomats coming from different countries, especially major powers like the United States, China, are talking and discussing certain significant issues, especially when you talk about the region. Because as you can see, the region right now is very tension driven, and I hope that in this kind of meeting there would be somewhat a positive outcome. And I hope China can communicate with the United States and how it should behave in the region. And I hope also that United States would listen to a greater extent to the regional countries pledge what they're trying to
Right.
talk to the United States
Right.
in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, let me bring in Zhou Bo. Zhou Bo, so obviously the the top diplomats talked with each other about their positions on the series of issues. Now with the focus on, let's say, South China Sea, of course, East China Sea, the Taiwan question, the confrontation between China and the Philippines. So what, if there's any conclusion you can draw, or will their talk somehow help, pacify the situation here?
Well, I think it's always good, for China and U.S. to talk on different things, even if they disagree on things, because China and the United States are the two largest economy and the gap actually is closing, I believe. So therefore, both sides can afford to talk. So I always encourage China to talk to the United States about different things, even in some new domains such as AI, cyber, and outer space. When it comes to the South China Sea, I think this most important thing is in the past we in China and the United States always talk about a bilateral relationship. Now there is an element of a third party. In this case, it is the Philippines. Yeah, and but I do agree with the Filipino speakers that there isn't such a risk of China and the Philippines running into a conflict, precisely because China's military strength is overwhelming, and we have never, talked about using force against any ASEAN countries. So my solution for this, ASEAN or Second Thomas issue is that let Mother Nature solve this problem. Yeah, because Mother Nature has a so-called force majeure. Yeah, and we so far, I believe, have been quite self-restrained. Otherwise, how could the Filipino Marine Corps soldiers stay on the ship for 25 years, given our overwhelming military strength? So I hope this issue could be resolved peacefully. Right now, China and the Filipino government actually are talking to each other behind the scene. So I believe a kind of understanding has already been reached. So I'm confident there will be no conflict.
Mr. S.L. Kanthan, welcome to the show. We know that during this tour, Mr. Blinken, of course, pledges to provide $500 million in military financing to the Filipinos there. And then in Japan, U.S. Secretary of Defense Austin announced the U.S. upgrading its military command in Japan. So, I would say, one of the key part of the tour is really to increase the U.S. military presence in this region. How do you look at that move?
Yeah, so Blinken once said, well, if you're not at the table, then you are on the menu, which means if you're not with the U.S., we are going to bomb you. So this trip is basically recruiting people for that metaphorical table. But these people will not be sitting at the table. They'll be fighting and dying on behalf of the U.S. empire. And it's really sad because if you look at, say, the Philippines, their GDP per capita is less than $4,000. And they should be focusing on the development of the country and working with China, who can do a lot of things in terms of the infrastructure. But instead, they want to sort of become like the Ukraine of the Asia, and they're just becoming a geopolitical pawn. And the U.S., it talks a lot. They meet with the Chinese foreign minister, and President Xi Jinping went to the U.S. at the end of last year. But the U.S. has only one goal, and that is to contain China. And, and if you look at Blinken's 10-day trip right now, and if you look at all the countries he's going to, it's basically surrounding China.
Kanthan, I want you to talk more about the U.S. strategy. If you look at the recent years, the U.S. moves and policies, first they have the Quad, with India, Japan, Australia, basically everybody understand that's targeting China. And then you have AUKUS, bringing nuclear weapons, nuclear submarines to this region, with the UK, with Australia again. And then now they are strengthening, upgrading military ties with Japan, previously with South Korea, Japan, and with the Philippines, Australia, etc. It's all about strengthening military presence. What will that lead to?
Yeah, it's really very scary because so you can look at the Ukraine model and how the U.S. tried to wage a proxy war against Russia. And they will try to do the same thing like in Asia. And the deal with Japan, the so-called joint forces, it seems to me like it's basically about the U.S. taking over the Japanese forces, and the U.S. is going to be the boss of the Japanese military. And the Philippines, they are building more military bases. The U.S. brought in the intermediate range missiles to the Philippines. These are all very, very troublesome, and this is not something that the Asian countries should be focusing on or falling for the scheme.
Well, Anna, how do you look at the development, in particular, I mean, where you are from, the Philippines, right?
Given what is going on in the country right now and the ongoing militarization of the United States of my country, I don't see it as beneficial to my country. First and foremost, it's not within our national interest. The national interest of the country is sovereignty, the preservation of sovereignty, independence and autonomy, most especially, and also economic development or prosperity. But what the American is doing is we are being converted or transformed into the next Ukraine of Asia, which is not good, not only for the Philippines, but even for the rest of the region. Because if there's something happened that involving the Philippines militarily speaking, it will affect the whole region. And when you talk about the South China Sea, I really hope that the agreed provisional arrangement right now in terms of resupply mission in the Ayungin Shoal, or what you call the second Thomas Shoal, will work out in not only now but in the long run, because there was a successful mission that happened just last Saturday or Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. But the problem with the Philippines right now is the current president is not someone that you can trust that he will be consistent in his pronouncement and his statements, and sometimes policy changes every now and then. This is very, very worrisome, precisely because, as what the other speaker have said, I mean, it seems that the United States is governing and even is the one handling when you talk about security and military in my country. So this is not good. And one more thing that we have to remember, there is already a deployment or deployed mid-range capability ground-based missile system in the Philippines, in the northern part of Luzon. This is not good. This is it provokes other countries. Even President Putin already pointed it out, and I think China is reacting to this. And even our Secretary of Foreign Affairs justified this as a defensive posture of my country, which I don't agree. This is more of an offensive posture as far as the Philippines is concerned, vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Russia, and vis-a-vis other countries in the region. And I don't think all of these are good for my country at the end of the day. So
No.
I hope that the current president will listen to the voices like mine and other people also in the region, so that we can avoid conflict, and conflict will never be good for the region, never be good for my country.
Well, Zhou Bo, lastly, the U.S. often talk about a theory of deterrence. As long as we become more military gear, more militarily powerful, and then that will deter the other side from any kind of action. But the problem is, like, if you do that, and the other side will do similar things, will strengthen their military presence. That will lead to confrontation, more confrontation, actually. 1 minute, Zhou Bo.
Well, I think you're right. You see, deterrence could be interpreted in different ways, depends on who is talking about it. I think if you are talking about this whole region, the Indo-Pacific region, I believe America's purpose is not only to control China. It is also attracted by the vigor, the dynamity of this region. But there is one dimension of the American strategy, that is to contain China. But because the American strength is no longer as strong as it was, so therefore that is why Biden administration would give unprecedented, importance to allies, right?
Well,
I hope, because they hope the allies will help you.
Stop there.
I don't believe it.
With that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.